Hello, and welcome to another episode of Office Chat. Today's topic is COVID-19 and the impact it's having on women, more in particular, women of color. In our last discussion, I had joining with me, Dr. Fears and Dr. Washington, and we were speaking about what companies could do to help women out during this time of need. Women make up, professional women, half of the workforce. That being said, I would say, the last time I looked, about a third were looking at leaving the workforce because of COVID-19 to take care of a family member or a child. One of the other things that was cited for women leaving the workforce was emotional support, and many of them were head of the household. So trying to balance COVID-19 and the family life was almost impossible. So here we are. That number is more so affecting women of color who find themselves the breadwinner, head of household, and they don't necessarily have a cushion to bounce back on when COVID-19 hit. So what do? Many of them are leaving the workforce. Dr. Fears, what are your thoughts since our last conversation?
Well, that last comment you made, you said many are leaving the workforce due to COVID-19. The ones who can afford to leave are leaving the workforce.
Mhm.
Keep in mind, some women work because they're supporting their families or they do it on the side. Many of us, women of color and Latina and Hispanic women, work and we are the heads of households. So a lot of times we don't have a choice to leave. So there's a difference. What I'm reading and finding is that the ones who leave were doing it to support what was already going on with the other partner or head of the household. So there's a distinction there.
Okay.
And it is very stressful. I was in another research meeting earlier, and we were talking about about all of the kids who are unaccounted for, who have not even started school. This is November. We're in the hundreds of thousands across the United States who never went back.
Dr. Washington?
Yeah, you make a really interesting point. I've been studying and following the narrative on higher education and even K through 12. And a lot of that is very challenging for women who are single mothers or who are head of household in terms of their finances are what drives the livelihood and survival of the family. And it's really not a choice to make between caring for your family or caring for your child and work. Who can make such a decision? And so what I'm noticing in some places, not all places, it's not just the organization's responsibility, but in some places, city government is stepping up to offer support to those families. Mind you, it's not helping all families, but it is an effort to try to work to sustain what's necessary for survival for these women. And I know that's happening right now. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, and that's a big push right now. Our governor just released $10 million to go towards working mothers to help support them financially in the midst of the pandemic, especially those who have lost their jobs or who've been furloughed or even moved to part-time. Mm-hmm. So there has been some level of encouragement of city government, but certainly it's going to take a lot more than that to sustain these households and sustain women and families.
Right. Now, on the panel also, after our discussion in episode 3, I reached out to working moms who are in the thick of this so that they could share their stories as to how COVID-19 is impacting them and what they're doing, their survival skills. I have on the panel Dana Vernon, I'm sorry. And she is a CEO of a stay-at-home mom. I also have with me Nickie Robinson, who's the CEO and founder of GoodGirlPR, as well as attorney Winifred Wharff. Welcome to the panel discussion. So ladies, what are you encountering or what have you encountered since COVID-19? How has it impacted your lives? Attorney Wharff?
Well, just from my personal experience, I am an attorney, a compliance attorney, where I met you, Rob. And I am currently doing contract work for independent, for clients. So I have my own company. And just last year, I had a contract in New York City, and my contract was cut short. So that impacted my family in the middle of a move where my dad got sick and he was infected with the virus. Thank goodness he's okay after 2 months in the hospital. But this significantly affected the income that I was bringing in. And I am not a single parent. I have a partner, but you never know what can happen. So there was a lot of stress with whether he was going to get laid off, he was going to get his hours cut, which it did happen. And then a few months later, my client, my project had been cut short. At the same time, we moved states because of my ill elderly parents. And my son started school in Florida, but he is also a special needs child. He is a 7-year-old with ADHD and high functioning autism. So that brings another set of challenges. We had to enroll him in a specialized school that costs a lot of money, and where my income would have really helped out with that tuition in the past, my partner had to take the bulk of that. Fast forward to today, in November, we had enrolled our child in August, which is when school starts here, but that school didn't work out because they didn't know how to adequately deal with this child. So I was then faced with the decision of trying to enroll him in another school or taking the lead and being responsible for my child's schooling. And I decided to do that. So I am now a homeschool mom full time. That's a whole nother discussion. At that point, I was faced with the decision as to whether I would take on a new client, which was available to me at the time, or whether we then had to make a decision whether I would take that client or whether I could rely on my partner to fund the household full time while I schooled both children. I have a 2-year-old and a 7-year-old full time, and I decided to do that. So this is a new avenue for me, not working, and then now being a teacher, a full-time teacher, not working with a curriculum, but building a curriculum on my own and teaching my 2 children. So this is where I am right now. Deep waters that are very new to me, and it's very challenging. The other thing that I'm going to say really quickly is that I'm finding that my relationship with my child has now changed and shifted a little bit for the worse, because now there's this distinction between mom and full-time teacher. And I feel like I cannot adequately draw the lines as to when mom stops and starts and when teaching stops and starts, because sometimes due to all of the things that I have to cover, I'm teaching well up until 8 o'clock at night. So trying to find that work-life balance, where it was a challenge with my career life and home balance, is now a challenge with education life and home balance. So I'm still trying to navigate that right now.
Okay.
And that's where I am.
Okay. And Nickie Robinson, Good Girl PR. What are you encountering?
Well, I actually took my daughter out of school in April. The reason being was because I was paying for private school, full tuition for only 3 hours a week. And economically, that didn't make any sense to me. She was already the top of her class. I think she might have been the valedictorian or salutatorian, already reading. So she kind of didn't know school ended. I continued to work with her, and I hired a tutor this summer. Starting September, we started school remotely. However, I found it very stressful. I found that we were doing homework past the normal times. It was hard to get her to focus. So I decided in November to make her go back to school. So now she's back in school in person. They have to wear a mask. She stays in after school, temperature checking, and she's happier. She's the only child, and I feel like kids need to be social. So she's back into school now. As far as work is concerned, as you know, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I started Good Girl PR knowing that I would never want to be a slave to corporate America. I also am a law graduate, worked in compliance since 2004. Just learned in 2008 not to put all my eggs in one basket. So while I've been working on Wall Street, I also had Good Girl PR and other business ventures. So during COVID, I'm actually busier. I did lose a contract with the major company. However, because I had this company that I started during the last recession, I was able just to put more energy into it. And right now, I've never been busier. So financially, I would say that I'm fine. I have to delegate things. Like at one time, Rob, when I was living, sorry, you guys, I'm in the car picking up my daughter from school. But at one time when I was living in the financial district, I was criticized for like having people to help clean up or having a nanny. But I'm realizing that I need help. I'm only one person. At that time, I was married. Now I'm a single mother, but I have to delegate things. I have a cleaning lady who comes twice a week, I moved down the block from my old nanny. Like, I have to have a support system. I am not too proud to ask for help anymore. I am not Superwoman, and it's okay to ask for help and to delegate things to make your life easier. And that's what I'm doing right now.
Right. Thank you. And Ms. Slusarenko, your thoughts on the matter? Yeah, I know that you're a CEO, full-time stay-at-home mom, which is
Yes.
also has its challenges.
Definitely. I think, unlike my fellow panelists, I am the only stay-at-home mom here. And one thing I've that's really hit home that I will admit to is that I think I'm a pretty good parent, but I'm a terrible teacher. And that is one thing that COVID has taught me. So my kids, I have two boys, now they're 10 and 12. Their schools closed down in March. So they were home doing online learning from March, and I kept them home for the first marking period. So they just went back last month in October.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized one of the biggest challenges during COVID was the emotional labor involved in dealing with the entire family, not just my kids, but my husband and myself. But specifically about the kids, they are social creatures. We are all social creatures, and having their lives turned upside down as they were, and having to now relearn a skill, and that's online learning. It's a skill because it's not, we didn't have a homeschooling program. It was just simply remote learning, which basically meant whoever was at home became the teacher.
Right.
And it really put a strain on our relationships, both of the relationships with my 10-year-old and my 12-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
They also started having bouts of depression and hopelessness and aggression and frustration, all the feelings that, of course, would come with such a disruption to their lives. They're back in school now.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to admit, my older son, he's in junior high school, and we're in Texas. And truly, just about every other day, they send emails saying another case has come up, another case.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not closing the schools.
Right.
So that adds another layer of anxiety. Both my kids have been sick since going back in October. And with the elementary school, if for more symptoms, you must get a COVID test before going back to school. So luckily, both of my kids had COVID tests and they came back negative, but just the added anxiety of that alone was really challenging to navigate.
So from what I'm hearing is that from the three panelists here, that it's the emotional aspect that is taken not only on you but your family as a whole. and realizing that you can't do it by yourself. Okay, so it's more than just financial, but the emotional element, which carries over to your children.
Mhm.
And women, and as we said in my previous show, that women are expected to somehow be these creatures, superwomen, and to do it. Not that the men aren't there to help out, but the emotions that women are taking on and looking at how we're going to pay the bills and, keeping the kids, making certain that we're raising a happy family. It's a lot. My doctors, what do you say?
Oh, absolutely. As a psychologist, I totally agree. I think we had a conversation, I don't know if it was the last call, Rob, but previously I talked about one of the things for leaders who are leading in crises is they have to really check in emotionally with their workers. Because anytime you're dealing with crises, uncertain times, it does lead to anxiety, depression, stress. And if those things are not managed properly, things can spiral out of control quickly. And some things, when they spiral out of control, they don't return back to normal and they can lead to other challenges. And so you're just building up on the challenges, it's mounting, and that leads to a whole nother set of issues. And if a person is not emotionally well, they're often not going to be their self in terms of being a parent or even doing their job at their optimal level of performance. So you have to, it's classic psychology, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If the basic needs are not met, you cannot begin to expect secondary and third level needs to be met and met at a level of expectation and where people can thrive. And you can still thrive in crises, but it's hard to do it when the emotional and the physical needs are not being met.
Right. Dr. Fears?
Yes, I would. I'm not a trained psychologist, but I know the impact that mental health can have on a family because I was raised by a parent who struggled with mental health. So I've always honored the mental health profession, and I know the importance of getting that help. But another thing, first of all, let me just give a shout out to the three parents here today. My hat is off to you. I admire you all so much, my goodness. And keep up the good work. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
I watched my nephew and my two nieces. I raised these babies and I watched them get to the end and have no graduation ceremony. And I remember my nephew, I told him, we're still going to send out announcements about your graduation. And his comment was, I'm not graduating. I said, yes, you are, baby. You're just not going to have a ceremony. He was just, and I probably was more bothered than he was because I had looked forward to this. As soon as I got the dates about this time last year, I put them in my calendar because I knew I had to get a flight to the one on the East Coast. And when I realized there would be no graduations, this has never happened, not to TT. I make everybody's graduation. And so, and then the deaths. For a while there, I was averaging hearing about the death of someone under 50 and under 40 at least once a week. And then it would be 2 in 1 week and not 1 week. And I'm processing all of that. Usually, you can expect someone in their 80s. So you have to deal with that. So yes, the counseling, I tell people if it's too much, make sure you can get counseling. Here where I work, we get complimentary counseling sessions, 6 per year, and they're free. And I have used them in other cases where I was going through something with following the death of my father. I used it and use those counseling because I just had to process and figure out how to put things in place. That was a big life-changing moment. So yeah, the pandemic, and I believe it was Miss Dana. She mentioned the emotional labor that she's going through, and I hadn't thought about the emotional labor having to be mom and then be the teacher. And you're probably doing a good job. Take it easy.
Right.
So, and like I said, my hat is off to everyone, and that's
Right.
keep up the good work.
No, Attorney Wharf, something that you mentioned, you said that your dad contracted the virus and having to look after your dad as well as the two young ones. So the
Right.
emotional stress that that was placed on you, and then having to navigate, like you said, looking at the jobs and having to relocate. Uh, how were you able to process all that? I'm sure, I mean, you're still going through it because your dad is still with you,
Yeah.
kids, but I mean, did you decompress? Did you take a step back? Or because again, women
So
are expected to be super women.
that's right. So I'm also the oldest sibling, and so with that comes what the usual responsibilities are, where I was the one that had to take the reins and, you know, move my entire family. And, you know, my partner did step up and we were, you know, making all of the home care arrangements, you know, applying to private schools, applying for special needs grants in a state that we were not familiar with, trying to get more clients and so forth. So the delegation of roles, as another of my fellow panelists had mentioned, had to just take hold, and I had to try and, I didn't have time to process all of that, but it has taken its toll, and I found that I'm feeling the effects of that now, and then it is trickling down to my children.
Right.
And I am not afraid to say that I do need the help. And part of my process right now is trying to get help for myself emotionally so that my children do not suffer, because a, there's a lot of time being spent homeschooling, managing the finances, which thank God we are in a good place. You know, just shifting things with my, you know, our house in New York, our tenants and things like that. And so there are just lots of new issues that have surfaced, but the emotional toll is being felt today. And again, it's not just me, it is my children that are also dealing with that, and my partner. So I tell you, you have to be strong because this has taken its toll on everyone, but there is a silver lining. And with that, I will say that as much tension and stress and pressure that has been on us, it has also allowed us to get closer as a family unit also. We have more dinners together. We're together as a family more often. We hurdle together and we come together even when we've all had a bad day and screamed at each other. It has taught us coping skills in terms of how to kind of just hit that reset button and okay, we got to just get this done.
Right.
Let's regroup.
Right.
So with that, it has also had its benefits. We do more arts and crafts together as a family. I have a more hands-on experience with my son and his disabilities, and I know where his deficits are in school with his writing, and I know what his slower processing, but he also has high functioning ASD. So I know that in math, he's doing fourth grade math, but he's in second grade, you know. So these kinds of things are very eye-opening, because in a school where he was in New York with 18 children at a private school and 2 teachers, now he's 1 out of 2 children with 1 teacher. And so I get to specialize his curriculum and focus more on his deficits and give him less of that busy work that doesn't really do anything for him. So there has been a silver lining, but we need to kind of work those kinks out in terms of the emotional strain that it's had on all of us.
Right. Now, Dr. Washington, that's one of the things that you have been mentioning in each of the broadcasts, the emotional aspect. We started out with that as to how people need to take a check on it. And something that the attorney mentioned is that during this adversity, it also brought the family closer. So would that not be another element of checking the emotions and trying to bring that together?
Absolutely. I think you want to lean on those who you rely on and trust. certainly to have family and to be with your family. It's a blessing at this time. Some people aren't able to be around their family. So when you have that, certainly find the time to do things that keep the mood light, that allow you to do things that are enjoyable and to build a stronger bond. That's what family is about, certainly in time of need. It's great to have family around and to do those things. So I applaud you for finding that time and using it in that way. If nothing else, I said part of the COVID has really allowed people to just slow down a moment.
Right.
Just take stock of what is happening and what is still good and focus on those things. And that will help to keep you from spending too much time on the negative and really allowing you to focus more on the positives and the things that are going well. So sounds like you all know what you need to do and are doing it. So you're well ahead of the game.
And then Ms. Robinson, what you're saying as far as, your child, you took her out of school and then you put her back in school. Is she aware or does she say anything about what's happening about COVID-19? And I guess I can ask all of you that. What are your children's knowledge as to what's happening? They're not able to go to school.
Right. Well, as you know, in March, I wrote a book about how to survive the coronavirus using your common sense. So as I was writing that book, she was privy to that experience. So she's well aware of what COVID-19 is. She stopped putting her hands in her mouth and touching her face. She's a proponent of wearing a mask, and she'll come in the bathroom while I'm in there and put hand sanitizer in my hands. So I'm not really worried about her at school. But again, children need other children. They need to be social. And I just felt really guilty as an only child keeping her in the house, knowing that a mask can protect lives.
Right. That's true. Ms. Slusarenko, what do you say?
So when this first started, when we became really hyper aware of COVID and the effects of COVID, I think I took it a step further and used to keep a calendar, and I would track the counts here in my county in Texas, just to have conversations with my husband and my kids about what was happening, and that led to other conversations about how to protect yourself, not just yourself, but how do you protect your community, and the importance of masks and the importance of, again, kids are kids, keeping your hands out of your mouth, your eyes, nose, becoming more aware of your environment and your place in the environment and what you can do. So they really do, and I have to say their schools have done a great job in ensuring that the kids comply with the mask mandate. And there's hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere. They can't use the water fountains, things like that. The only time that they can take their masks off is when they're actually eating something in the cafeteria. And even in the cafeteria, I believe it's either 3 or 4 kids to a long table. So they're doing all that they can do in trying to socially distance the students. But at the same time, what children and their families do outside of school impact what happens in the schools.
Right.
So it's having conversations with my kids, letting them know that no, they can't go to play dates. You can't have play dates. You can't have people over. You can't go to such and such's party, because there are families that are somewhat dismissive of the rules, and they have to be aware that they're just going to have to miss out, and that's okay.
Right.
I want them to ask themselves the question, is it worth it? If this is a defining moment where I could get sick because I wanted to play basketball with such and such, would it be worth it?
Right.
So that's how we're approaching it here.
Right. Now, something else we've been talking about, going back to the emotions and getting counseling. We all know that within the community of color, getting counseling is not always looked upon highly, especially for men and then for women. But how can we break that stigma? And it seems as though you guys, like you said, you're not afraid to go out, you need help, you'll say that you need help. But what would your advice be to other mothers? about getting counseling and telling their significant other, you know, we can't do this by ourselves. We've got to get counseling. We've got to introduce someone else. There's only so much we can keep and talk about. What advice would you say?
Well, I have to say, I'll speak for myself. It's interesting because what I've done, my self-care has been, I go for walks every day. And I'm fortunate to live in a community where we have wide streets. And so there's several mothers that come out and we just do a walk. We socially distance and we walk and we talk. And it's surprising how many parents talk about their children as young as, 7 years old, who are now seeing therapists because they are having, it's been too much of a challenge to do it all on their own, because mothers are expected to be able to handle everything.
Right.
Kids come to moms, partners come to moms. We're supposed to handle it all, and we can't. There's certain things, even with my kids, a lot of things. I do a lot of research. I do the best I can. I use my common sense, but at a certain time, I know when I need to pass the baton on to someone else.
Right.
And a lot of parents here, at least, are feeling the same. And it's not so much of a stigma. I will say, though, I'll put the caveat that unfortunately, I do not live in a very diverse community. I'll say that.
Right.
So when it comes to, other parents of color, I can't really speak to that just yet.
Right. But passing the baton, like you said, knowing I can do this, but I can't do that, knowing when to pass it off.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Ms. Robinson, your thoughts?
Oh, you would like my commentary regarding the importance of therapy?
Yes. I think there's a delay.
Oh, thank you. So, sorry about that. I went to a school called Marlboro in Los Angeles. It's an all-girls school. So we always had an on-site therapist. So, of course, I kind of grew up thinking that therapy was okay. But I do feel that in the Black community, seeking a therapist is looked down upon. And it's a stigma that as a publicist, I'm actually working on breaking through the representation of a trauma expert named Dr. Sekou. So it's just a narrative that we have to push in our community that, counseling and psychotherapy is a good thing.
Okay. Dr. Thiers?
Well, what I do is when I'm talking to people about the importance of therapy, I always explain that it's just as important as keeping check on your hypertension and your blood pressure. And sometimes it helps to explain that mental health is just as important as the health that you are keeping check on your health with all of these internal diseases that people in our community are prone to. So I think that helps. And then when there's an opportunity to see a celebrity admit that they've had help, mental or therapy, as she just said, that usually helps too, to break the ice and say it's okay to get help. And then I also describe what happens in a session. You just go and talk to someone and you're not judged and it's confidential. And a lot of times I think people think that somebody's going to be in all of my business. They don't think I'm the word crazy. So, but I think if you just explain what it really is and why it's important, because once you lose your good mental health, the rest of your body can't function. You can be healthy, muscular, in top shape, running 2 miles a day, but if you lose this, the rest can't function. And take it from someone who has seen someone who has suffered and had to be institutionalized. And that's something I hate to see happen to anyone, because that will have an effect on you that you will always remember.
Right. Dr. Washington?
Yeah, I'm reminded of something my mother said to me once. I was going through a difficult time and she said, I want to caution you that you don't want to lose your good mind, because once you lose that mind, you may not get that one back. You'll get another one back, but it won't be that one. So the lesson is, when you see that you have a situation or a challenge, address it. The saying goes, be true to thine own self. And when we have experience going through therapy and we share that experience with other people, I think it gives a greater sense of the benefit of it, what really helps for going to a therapist, and understanding that it's not as bad as it may be portrayed in our community or stigmatized as, but it's certainly a resource. And that's what we have to learn to understand, is taking advantage of resources that are going to help us when we have a time of need. And it's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Right.
And so learning that it's okay, simply
Right.
to know it's okay to seek help from a professional concerning your mental well-being.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you. Attorney Wharf, would you like to add anything?
I just like to echo the sentiments of everybody on the panel. You know, I can't speak to anything besides, you know, mental health should be taken care of first and foremost. You have to take care of yourself before you can take care of anyone else, and the importance of doing that. There is indeed a stigma, and I think that's breaking down little by little. The more people do come out in the public eye and state that they have issues, and I think the avenues for getting that kind of help is a little bit more accessible now, where you have therapists that you can speak to online or over the phone. You know, all of these things that have come about with COVID, you don't even have to go anymore. And even online, where you can find online support, even just through Facebook or maybe even Instagram, and you know, people that are in your group, in your circle, in your clan, and those people do help push us along, and maybe share resources like a free Zen app for meditation, or just people giving you a positive affirmation for the day. So, you know, even those little things I feel can be helpful. Those are things that I leverage when I'm having a hard time, or if I have a question, I put it to the group or the community at large, and I get responses back that may not have even just addressed my issue head on, but just maybe put me in a better space to kind of reassess that issue and look at it from a different way. So yeah, I think we can find that emotional support and therapy from a number of different avenues, a number of different places. So yeah.
Well, I would like to thank all of my panelists for joining me for this very interesting conversation, the effect of COVID-19 on moms, working moms, and stay-at-home moms. Thank you, be safe, and tune in
Thank you,
again for
Rob.
the next episode of Office Chat. Thank you all.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.